So to start this lesson about the healthcare system types, in order to make it sort of somehow empirical and touchable for you, we will start with statistics, with health expenditure statistics. And we will see what statistics can tell us. And it's quite surprising. They will tell us the type of healthcare system already. Now, here you have the figures from the OECD. They have very good health statistics. You can look at it in internet. This comes from their database. So here we have health spending, public and private together, per GDP, per percentage of GDP, and per capita. So it's a little bit difficult to read because everything is in this little statistic, and we will see lots of interesting things. So you have here these green sticks. They will tell you how much there is in percentage, the percentages here, of GDP spent in each country. For instance, in Norway, they spend nearly 12% of their GDP in healthcare. And where you have the little, oh no, sorry, the little point is the GDP part, and the sticks are the share of per capita spending. I hope you understand what it means, per capita spending. It means when you take the whole public and private expenditure in a country for healthcare in 1 year, and you divide it by the number of inhabitants, by the number of heads in the country, taking all the babies and all the old ladies, then you have a figure which is the spending in average per capita in that country for 1 year. And you will see figures are surprising. So here we have, what can we see on this statistic? There's another thing I have to explain to you before, because you may not know it. The figures are euros PPP. I don't know whether you know what it means. It's the same thing than dollars PPP. It means parity purchasing power. So this is not a money you can buy in a bank. It's not a real money. It is just taking either in dollars or in euros or in yen or whatever, different amounts of expenditure for transport or for healthcare. And then you adapt this amount to the purchasing power in the country. So how much money do people have in the country? How much do they earn? How much do they spend to live? There is international criteria to calculate this. And then you can compare. You know, when I have figures, let's say healthcare is $1 in some strange country a year, you would say, well, it's very little. But if for $1 you can buy nearly a house in that country, then you see it's quite a lot of money. So this is what it means, PPP, purchasing parity purchasing power. And here we have it in euros, because Europe, formerly we calculated in dollars, now we do it also in Europe, in euros. So here you have these figures. Let's see Norway, for instance. It has nearly 4,500 PPP euros for each person is spent in healthcare. And it means in terms of GDP, where the point here is 4,000. So we can see they spend more money per head than, for instance, France. They are the share of GDP is very high, but the spending per head is very low. I come back to this problem in a minute because it has a certain signification. So here we have the spendings, and let's say first what we see is the northern countries, northwestern countries, Norway, Germany, Netherlands, Austria, Sweden, Denmark. All those who are in the west and in the north, they spend quite a lot of money. And as we go further down, but there are some isolated northern cases like Iceland or Finland. But basically, as we go to the south, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and to the east, Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, it gets less and less. So that's the first thing we see. So Northern Europe, the Western continental European countries are big spenders for healthcare. And it's followed by a mix of southern countries and eastern countries. You know, you have a mix of, you know, Malta and Ireland and Spain, and then you have Slovenia. They're sort of in the middle. And as you go further on, you have more or less the former communist countries. It means their economy has not yet quite recovered and they cannot afford to spend on health as much as we do in the West or in the North. Norway, by the way, is not a member of the European Union, but it is very often in the statistics because it is a member of what we call the European Economic Area. So it's sort of privileged partner. So we take them in the statistics. So the second thing we see is per capita spending is not following quite the same curve than the GDP. Here you have the GDP, high, 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 and then it drops to the, this is the GDP line, and this is per capita. And per capita is what people are interested in. It's what you spend on healthcare for each person. And if you have a family of 4, you will have to multiply this money by 4 for that family. And if there's only one earner in the family, it means somewhere else there are 3 people who pay for that family. You understand the logic. This is the price you have to pay when you want really universal health care. As I said, you pay according to your means into the system, and what you get out is according to your needs. So if you have 3 children and you are a single mother, you will have probably more needs than a couple without children. So this is the logic of the system. Yeah, I wanted to show you, to explain an economic problem, look at France and look at Germany. So Germany has practically the same amount of spending for per capita than it has percentage of GDP. I mean, it's sort of equalizing. Huh? And in France, you have quite a big difference. We have also difference in Sweden, but it's smaller than the French one, and in Belgium. And then comes France. Luxembourg, don't look at Luxembourg. They spend a lot of money per capita, but it's a small part of their GDP because they are fiscal paradise. They have lots of banks and work with a lot of money, which is not from their citizen. So that is a special example. You have the same in Ireland. It's the same type of profile. So now, why does France have this problem that it has a low per capita spending here? It corresponds to what is said here. Government and compulsory insurance, and you, with the lighter green, you add any private insurance. This part, this part here would be the private one. And then the share of GDP is quite higher. If I was in the classroom, I would ask you to write down on a little paper the answer, what this signifies. What is the meaning of a case when you have high GDP spending compared to other countries and a much lower per capita spending compared to these same other countries? What do you think it means? Well, as I'm not in a classroom, I will have to give you the answer. It means that the GDP per capita is very low in that country. That's what it means. So it means, in other terms, the healthcare system, which this country has, it's very expensive compared to the means, economic means this country has. And if we go along the line, we will see that it's, a sort of general rule. As we go to the poorer countries, we have here a share of GDP much higher than the per capita spending. This is what I tried to show you with this little text here. Low per capita spending, but high in GDP. It means that you have a minimum of health expenditure, which you can probably not lower much, otherwise you have bad care. But as your economy is not very rich and not very productive, it takes you this little per capita money, takes you a lot of your GDP. And this is what you see here. From here onwards, the distance gets really very big here. So, and if you look at these countries, you can see that you have a mixture of Southern European countries and Eastern European countries. So the Southern European countries, like France, who is the first to initiate this sort of bad theory, all these countries, France, and then we have Italy, with a southern country with a big difference here. Then we have Spain, even bigger. And then we have Portugal, even bigger. And then come the Eastern, and Greece, even bigger. And the rest are Eastern countries. So what unites France, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece? But they had enormous public debts. And that is what puts the economy down. And this is what you can read in these figures. So they have a healthcare system which is just too expensive for their economy. It costs them a lot of money because they are not so productive, or they pay a lot of money to pay back their debts. And the Eastern European countries, the new member states of the European Union, you know, all these Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Latvia, Baltic countries, Romania, Bulgaria, they had to struggle very hard to get out of their communist past. And I think in your reading, it is explained, some of these countries succeeded very well in getting into a new economy, a liberal economy, and they managed very well. And others succeeded less well and even failed. And the countries you have here at the end are these failures. And what they mainly failed was fighting against corruption. So you can, this statistic tells you only about health spending, but you can read the sort of, you know, the mirror of society. You can read the whole history of the last 30 years of economy in these countries and political history. Okay, I hope this is clear for you. You know, in France, you can see it. For capita, France is a, you know, quite a rich and developed country, but it is sort of second with Germany for GDP spending. They spend from GDP an equivalent part, but in per capita, France drops to the 9th position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So from top to the 9th position, that is this economic discrepancy between the healthcare system and the general economy. So these statistics explain you a lot about the relationship between society, economy, and healthcare. Now let's see what else we have. This is life expectancy in European countries. It is figures for 2020, but they integrate the figures from 2000, these little squares here from 2000, and then for 2010 and 2020. Now 2020, it is not quite sure whether they have already, let's take France, whether they integrated already the drop of COVID. You know, in 2019, France had a life expectancy of 83 years, I think. And then it dropped, and this is the COVID drop. And now, what did they tell us here? 32, yeah, these are figures from 2020, so it integrates already the first year of COVID, when there was a drop in life expectancy. Now, if you look into this statistic, and we look at the countries here, which are top, highest life expectancy, whatever year in 2000, 2010, it's about, you know, figures are high here and then they drop. We find quite a different picture than in the expenditure. So the first thing we can deduct from this is life expectancy does not depend on health expenditure. Otherwise, you would have a very similar statistic like we had here. With these countries, Germany in front, and Netherlands and Austria, but this is not what we see for life expectancy. Where's Germany? No, can't even see it. Germany is very much behind, just above the average. And where's Austria? Germany, Austria, very much behind. For spending, it was very high. So, and countries who spend very little, because they have such a lot of debt, like Italy, Spain, and Cyprus maybe, well, they suddenly are very much on top for life expectancy. It explains clearly that life expectancy depends only to a certain extent on medical expenditure. For instance, to save birth giving, that mothers don't die and that babies don't die, that will push your life expectancy high up. And if you save somebody who had a heart attack when he's 40 years old, and in a good healthcare system, you can save this person, in a bad one, he will die, that changes the statistic about life expectancy. But apart these cases, life expectancy depends on your living conditions, on what you eat, on your food, on your lodging, on your working conditions, transport conditions. I think in India, you have a lot of train accidents. We don't have so many in Europe. So it's probably the organization of the train infrastructure which makes more people die in India than in most European countries. You have all this and the poverty. When people are very poor, then they tend to die earlier. So life expectancy does not depend on health expenditure. So when the health people always want more money because they have to save more lives, they're telling us somehow propaganda for their business, even if the business is public. So we can see Germany is 14th. Oh, sorry, it slips always away. Germany here is number 14 when you count for life expectancy among these countries. But it was second for health spending per capita and per GDP. Austria, where's Austria? Austria is number 13 for life expectancy. It was fourth for per capita spending. Netherlands is 12th here for life expectancy. And for capita spending in healthcare, how much is spent for each person per year, it was third. So, and France is ranking very nicely in top here somewhere, no? A quite good life expectancy in France, you know, among the top countries. It starts to drop really from here as you come to the Eastern countries, because they have a lot of pollution from the former industry and they're still poor. So most of them. So let's take a little bit about Germany. Now, Germany spends much more on healthcare per person than France, but you live longer in France, but simply because the food is much better in France than in Germany. And recently I heard in a cultural French-German television chain, a very interesting talk about some European commissioner and a doctor and a few other people who look after prevention. And I dropped by accident into that show and into that discussion. And they explained that the European Commission had launched, given, how do you say that in English? An advertisement, a warning to Germany to say they should stop their cheap food because it was causing too much risk for health. Oh, I was a bit surprised when I heard it. I know how that people spend much more money on food in France than in Germany. Where German people like to spend money on, that's a cultural thing, they like to spend money on things that are sustainable. They will have a very nice house, they will have nice furniture and a very good car, but they wouldn't spend much money on food because that is pleasure just for a moment. And the French, they will spend lots of money in the restaurant, they drive a bad, dangerous car and live in a very sort of modest lodging, but they will go to the restaurant with all the children and the grandparents. So, and if you look here at life expectancy to the different European countries, you see Norway, Iceland, Ireland, Malta, Italy, Spain, Sweden, Cyprus, France, even Finland up to here. They all have seaside. They're either islands or on the seaside, on the Atlantic Ocean or on the Mediterranean Sea. So they eat a lot of fish. And these other countries, Denmark, Netherlands, well, Denmark also is on the seaside, but Netherlands, Austria, Germany, they eat a lot of pork. And that's not the best meat for your health. So you can see that the food is really present in this statistic. And you have all the Mediterranean countries, Italy, Spain. Now, why are they so good? Greece, despite a bad healthcare system and despite an economy which is not the richest and salaries are not the best. Like they cook with olive oil, not with grease from animals or butter. They cook with olive oil. And that's a very good regime. And they have, because of their climate, they have fresh vegetables all year round. They can eat fresh salad and fresh things. So there's a lot of studying on the Mediterranean food regime, and it turns out to be one of the best in the world, together with Japanese and some others. So if you live at the seaside, you eat a lot of fish and you cook with olive oil. Of course, you must not drink so much alcohol. And if you do, then drink rather wine rather than whiskey. It's not so strong. And you have a whole story about these cultural factors in this statistic. So this is why I wanted to show you this. Statistics can be much more interesting than what the figures just tell you. So the general point we can see here is there are 10 years of difference in life expectancy within the European Union between the countries where you live longest and the countries where you live least. And you have all the former communist countries here lined up. And that's very sad because it's not the people's fault what happened to them, to their economy and to their country. There's a lot of pollution still, there's a lot of electricity still made with coal and so on. Now, I want to make a last point on this about gender. This statistic here is men and women mixed. But normally we do life expectancy statistics separated for women and for men because women live much longer than, in general, women live longer than men. It's probably the genetics because they have to give birth and carry children. So in all developed countries, women live much longer than men. Now, the question I would have to Indian students is this also true for India? We know that India is a country where there are quite a lot of gender problems. Do Indian women, in average, live 5 or 6 years longer than Indian men, or is it the other way around? That would be a good test to know what the real situation of gender problem is in India. So I didn't put statistics on this because we can't go into all these details, but in the European Union, women live in average 5 years longer than men. 5 years and a few months. So life expectancy for men in the European Union, in the richer part, in Western Europe, so the richer countries, those who are sort of here somewhere, men live 79 years in average and women 84 in average. So this is life expectancy at birth. So it's 5 years of difference. And COVID, of course, decreased life expectancy in all the countries, whatever. Now, here you have summed up. Now, this is in euros, PPP euros. The per capita spending is just to show you a nice map to show where are the countries where you have good per capita spending on healthcare and those where there's much less. So here are the figures. For instance, in Turkey, it's not a member of the European Union, but a candidate, they spend 906 PPP euros per year per inhabitant on healthcare. And in Germany, it is 4,504 PPP euros. Now, if you look at the colors, here you have the different colors. The more it's dark, the more they spend. You can very well see Northern Europe and Western continental Europe and Ireland. They are big spenders for healthcare, probably because they were among the first countries to have a universal healthcare system, and then it becomes a habit. And the second then, this light blue here, they are sort of around, there's a sort of a ring around, from Britain and then Spain, Italy, and then Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, and then two Baltic republics already, former communist countries, and Finland. They are in this middle range. And then you have the poorer ones who spend very little, and they're all at the east. No, one Baltic republic, and then Poland and Slovakia and Romania. This is Bulgaria, Hungary, and so on. So you can see the traces of history. The breakaway from communism and the transformation into liberal systems was all very hard for these countries, and you can see it in life expectancy, in health expenditure, and so on.